Nobody at Ironspire believed the rumors at first. The compound sat on top of a cold mountain, surrounded by thick walls and older trees. For 5 years, it had been the most feared place in the region, not because of the walls, not because of the location, but because of the men and women who lived inside it. They were the strongest fighters anyone had ever seen. Their commander, Rael Stonemark, had led them through every difficulty imaginable, and they had never once lost. So when someone whispered that the Alpha King was coming back, most people at Ironspire simply laughed. "He has been gone for 5 years," said one of the guards near the iron gate. "A man does not disappear for 5 years, and then just walk back in." His partner nodded and went back to watching the road. That was on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the laughter had stopped. Mara Voss saw him first. She was the compound's record keeper. Every significant event at Ironspire passed through her hands at some point. Written down, dated, filed carefully. She had worked in the upper archive room for 11 years, and she had a window that looked directly down onto the front gate. She was in the middle of organizing old documents when something made her look up. She could not say exactly what it was. Not a sound, not a movement, more like a change in the air, the way a room feels different just before a storm arrives. A man was walking toward the gate from the far end of the road. He was not rushing, he was not trying to hide. He carried nothing in his hands that anyone could see. He wore no uniform, no insignia, no symbol of rank. His clothes were simple and dark. He walked at an even pace, the way someone walks when they have nowhere to be and all the time they need to get there. Mara set down her pen very slowly. The 2 guards at the gate saw him coming. They straightened up, as guards do when a stranger approaches. They put their hands near their equipment, as guards do when they are not sure what they are looking at. They looked at each other with the question that neither of them said out loud. By the time they looked back at the road, the man was already through the gate. Neither of them could quite explain how that had happened. Mara, watching from above, said one name very quietly. She said it like someone who had not said a word in a long time and was surprised to hear her own voice. She said, "Darian." The name moved through Ironspire the way names like that always move through a place. Not all at once, but in pieces, from person to person, each time landing a little heavier than before. A cook heard it from a junior guard and dropped a wooden spoon. A trainer heard it mid-sentence and forgot what he was saying. A young recruit heard it and did not even know who Darian Volkov was, but could tell from the faces of the older people around him that the name meant something very large. Commander Rael Stonemark heard it last. He was running a training drill in the East Yard. 20 of his best fighters were moving through formations with the precision of people who had done the same movements so many times that their bodies no longer needed to think about it. Rael was watching them with the calm, satisfied expression of a man who felt completely in control of his world. His second-in-command walked up and spoke quietly near his ear. Rael's jaw moved once, like he was chewing on something. Then he dismissed the drill with one hand signal and walked toward the courtyard. Not fast. Rael never moved fast out of emotion. He had trained himself out of that years ago. But his second-in-command, who had served beside him for a long time, noticed that the commander's steps were slightly shorter than usual, as if some small part of him was trying to slow down without admitting it. The 6 elite fighters of Ironspire fell in behind Rael without being asked. They always did. It was one of those things that happened naturally, like water finding its own level. They walked together across the courtyard, 6 people who had never been beaten, following a man who had never been wrong. Darian Volkov was standing in the center of the courtyard when they arrived. He had his back to them. He was looking up at the compound walls, slowly, the way a person looks at something they built a long time ago and are quietly checking whether it has been properly maintained. He did not turn around when he heard their footsteps. He did not tense. He did not prepare. He simply waited until they arrived, and then he turned around and he looked at them. That look was the first strange thing. It was not threatening. It was not angry. It was not the look of a man returning to challenge the people who had replaced him. It was something much quieter than that. It was the look of a man who already knows the end of a story and is simply watching the other characters catch up to it. Rael spoke first. His voice was steady. He had practiced this voice for years, measured, authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He said that Darian had been gone for 5 years. He said that Ironspire had moved forward without him. He said that no one had sent for him, and no one had expected him, and that it would be better for everyone if this visit was a short one. Darian listened to all of this. He let Rael finish completely. Then he was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who does not know what to say. The quiet of someone who is choosing carefully among many possible things. Then he said 4 words. Just 4. Nobody outside that courtyard ever learned exactly what those 4 words were. Mara wrote in her record later that the people who were present could not agree on the precise wording, only on the effect. What she wrote was this: whatever he said, it was true, and Rael knew it was true, and that knowledge was the beginning of everything that followed. Rael issued a formal challenge that afternoon. At Ironspire, this was a real tradition, a structured way to settle disputes about leadership and rank. It had rules, and it had witnesses, and it had a clear outcome. Rael chose it deliberately, because it was the most legitimate tool available to him, and because he had never lost one. Not once. Not in 15 years of issuing and accepting challenges across the region. Darian accepted without discussion. What happened next was the second strange thing. The challenge took place in the main training yard, with the entire compound watching. Rael was strong and fast and technically perfect. He had spent his life sharpening himself into a very precise instrument, and he moved like it. The people watching could see it clearly. Rael was doing everything right. But he was not landing anything. Every time he moved forward, Darian moved in some small way that made the movement pass harmlessly. Not dramatically, not with large gestures or impressive sidesteps. Just enough, the minimum necessary. Like a man who has been doing arithmetic for so long that the answers come to him before he even picks up the pencil. And then something shifted. Rael had been in many challenges. He knew the feeling of a turning point. He had always been on the right side of it. But standing in the training yard, somewhere in the middle of the exchange, he felt it turn in a direction he had never experienced before, and something inside him, something very old, something he had buried under 15 years of discipline and rank and reputation, recognized what it was looking at. His legs stopped working the way he told them to. He did not fall. He did not collapse. He simply found himself on one knee, breathing steadily, looking at the ground, and understanding something he had not understood before. The 6 elite fighters, watching from the edge of the yard, did not cheer for their commander. They did not make a sound at all. Over the next day and a half, Darian moved through the compound like a slow, quiet tide. He did not seek people out. He simply appeared in the places they already were. The training yard, the meal hall, the equipment room, the long corridor near the dormitories, and the 6 elite fighters found themselves, one by one, moving toward him. Not because they were ordered to, because they could not quite explain why they were not. The first to approach was the largest of the 6. A man whose physical strength was so exceptional that he had stopped thinking of it as an advantage years ago and simply thought of it as a fact, the way tall people stop being surprised by their own height. He had never met someone he could not outlast in a direct contest of endurance and force. He stood across from Darian in the training yard and understood within the first few minutes that force was not the right tool for this particular situation, and that he did not have another tool ready. He sat down on the floor of the training yard, cross-legged, and waited quietly. He was not sure what he was waiting for, but the waiting itself felt like the correct thing to do. The second was the tactical planner. She had notebooks full of approaches, built over years of careful study. She had prepared 17 specific plans for this exact type of encounter, because she had heard the rumors days before anyone else, and had used the time well. She walked into her conversation with Darian, organized, confident, and ready. He listened to her carefully. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he asked her one question. She opened her mouth to answer it and discovered, to her considerable surprise, that she could not. Not because she was unprepared, because the question reached into a part of her thinking that no amount of preparation had ever touched. She stood there for a moment with her notebooks in her hands, and then she put them down on the nearest surface and sat beside them, and thought about the question for a long time. The third was the one who specialized in reading people, understanding what someone needed to hear, finding the small gaps in a person's confidence, and speaking directly into them. This was not a cruel skill. It was simply an extremely accurate one. He had used it to help people, and to challenge people, and to end arguments before they began. He was very good at it. He tried it with Darian, He spoke carefully and watched for reactions. He adjusted as he went, the way a musician adjusts to an unfamiliar room. He found nothing to adjust to. Darian had no gaps that could be spoken into. Not because he was without feeling, but because he had already fully inhabited every part of himself. There was no empty space for an outside voice to move into. At the end of the conversation, the specialist sat very quietly for a while. Then he said, to no one in particular, that he thought he had been doing his work backward. He was not entirely sure what he meant by this yet, but it felt true. The other three followed over the course of the next several hours. The fastest fighter, who discovered that speed without direction was just movement. The endurance specialist, who realized that the ability to keep going was only valuable if you were going somewhere worth reaching. The one who believed most deeply in rank and structure, who found herself wondering, for the first time, whether she had ever actually chosen the things she believed in, or simply inherited them and never questioned. Mara filled pages and pages of her record journal during this time. She wrote about what she observed. She wrote about the expressions on faces, the quality of the silences, the way the atmosphere of Ironspire was changing hour by hour, in ways that were real, but difficult to put into words. She was a careful writer, not given to exaggeration, but on one page, near the middle of the second day, she wrote a single sentence that she underlined twice. She wrote, "The warriors did not lose. They remembered." On the morning of the third day, Darian gathered everyone, the entire compound, fighters, staff, cooks, trainers, administrators, the young recruits who had never met him and barely knew his name. All of them came together in the main hall. The room was large enough, but barely. People stood along the walls and near the back. Darian stood at the front with nothing behind him. No table, no platform, no decoration. He was simply a man standing in a room, and somehow the room felt organized around him, in the same way a compass organizes around north. He spoke for 17 minutes. The people in that room later had great difficulty repeating what he said, not because they had forgotten it, but because it seemed to arrive differently in each person. The same words, heard by different ears, appeared to find different places to land. Some people wept and could not explain why. Some people sat very straight and very still, with the expression of someone who has just understood something they had been looking at, without seeing for years. Some people looked at the floor, some looked at their hands. Rael Stonemark looked at the ceiling for most of it. When he finally looked down, somewhere near the middle, there was something different in his face. Not broken, not defeated. Something quieter than either of those things, like a man who has been carrying a very heavy bag for a very long time and has finally, carefully, set it on the ground. After the assembly, Ironspire was changed. This is the only way to say it plainly. The compound was the same building in the same location, with the same people in it, but something essential had shifted. The 6 elite fighters moved through the halls differently. Not smaller, not weakened, but settled in themselves in a way they had not been before. The energy that had always been pointed outward, toward challenge and comparison, and the constant maintenance of reputation, was now pointed somewhere quieter and more durable. Rael was the last person to leave the assembly hall that day. He sat alone in the empty room for a long time after everyone else had gone. His second-in-command waited in the hallway without being asked. The way people wait for things they understand are important. When Rael finally came out, his second-in-command looked at his face and did not say anything. He did not need to. He simply walked alongside him, and Rael let him, and they walked together down the long corridor toward the evening. On the morning of the 4th day, Darian was gone. There was no announcement, no ceremony. No one saw him leave. The gate guards, when asked, could not say exactly when the departure had happened. The road beyond the gate was empty and quiet when the sun came up, as it always was, except that now the absence it contained was a specific and particular one. He left a note on Mara's desk in the archive room. She read it once, standing in the morning light from her window. Then she sat down. Then she read it again, slowly. Then she took her best pen and copied it into the official compound record in her careful, precise handwriting. The original note she placed in the locked drawer at the bottom of the archive shelf, in the section reserved for the most important documents Ironspire had ever kept. The note said, "The wall is not what keeps you safe. The people who stand at the wall are." Ironspire did not collapse after Darian left. It did not fall apart. No one surrendered anything, and no one was asked to. What changed was less visible than any of that and more permanent. The 6 elite fighters kept training. Rael kept leading. The young recruits kept learning. The cooks cooked and the administrators administered. And Mara kept her records. But the way they did all of it was different now. A young recruit asked one of the elite fighters about a week later what had happened during those 3 days. He had heard many versions of the story already, but none of them quite added up to something he could understand, and he wanted to know from someone who had actually been there. The fighter thought about it for a while. She was the one who had specialized in speed, and she was not generally given to long explanations. Finally, she said, "You know how sometimes you are very focused on winning, and then something happens, and you realize you forgot to think about why you were competing in the first place?" The recruit said he thought so. She said, "It was like that, but bigger and quieter." The recruit nodded, even though he did not fully understand yet. He thought he might understand it later. The way you understand certain things only after you have lived a little more, and then one day look back and find the meaning waiting for you there, patient, where you left it. Mara wrote one final entry in the section of her record journal, dedicated to those 3 days. She dated it carefully. She wrote the details of the morning, the light, the temperature, the sounds from the yard below, and then she wrote, "The strongest people here did not become less strong. They became strong in a different direction, a direction that lasts longer and needs less defending." I have been keeping records at Ironspire for 11 years. I have written about training results and challenges and promotions and losses. I have never written about anything like this. I do not expect I will again. She closed the journal. Outside her window, the mountain was quiet. The trees were the same trees they had always been. The walls of Ironspire were solid and unchanged. The road below was empty. And somewhere out there, walking at his own pace, going wherever he needed to go next, was a man who had come back not to take anything, and not to prove anything, but simply because it had been time. And somehow, that had been enough.